Picture this scene if you will. Imagine stepping back in time, to a moment brimming with tension and uncertainty. It's April 25th, 1846. A seemingly ordinary day, yet one that would alter the course of history. You're a young Mexican soldier, perhaps a man like Anastasio Torrejon, full of youthful vigor and a sense of duty. You're not thinking about history books or the intricacies of shifting borders. Your mind is consumed by the immediate, the oppressive heat, the swirling dust, and the palpable tension that hangs heavy in the air near the Rio Grande. This river, a natural boundary, is now a flashpoint. Across the river, a stark symbol of foreign presence, American soldiers have erected a fort. It stands defiantly on land that, in your heart, you know is rightfully yours. The word from your commander is clear and resolute. They've crossed the river, a blatant act of aggression. They're invaders, plain and simple. Duty calls, and with a surge of adrenaline, you and your fellow cavalrymen ride out, hooves pounding against the parched earth. This isn't a grand, decisive battle etched in legend, just a messy, confusing skirmish, a chaotic clash of men and horses in the unforgiving landscape. Through the dust and confusion, you catch sight of Captain Seth Thornton, leading his American dragoons. The air crackles with the sound of gunfire. Horses scream in terror and pain, their riders struggling to maintain control. When the dust finally settles, revealing the grim reality of the aftermath, some American soldiers lie dead, while the remaining survivors are taken as prisoners. You've defended what you believe to be your land, acting on orders and conviction, not fully grasping that this seemingly small encounter will ignite a full-blown war. Now let's flip the script and see this pivotal moment through a different lens. Imagine you're an American dragoon, serving under Captain Thornton, hailing from a state like Ohio or Pennsylvania. You signed up for a variety of reasons. The promise of adventure, the steady lure of a paycheck, or perhaps the dream of acquiring land in this vast new territory. The word from President Polk is resolute. Texas is now officially U.S. territory, and the Rio Grande unequivocally marks the border. With unwavering resolve, you and your fellow soldiers march south, venturing deeper into unfamiliar territory. The culture is alien, the language indecipherable, and the customs perplexing. Everything around you feels foreign and unsettling. You're simply following orders, diligently performing your duty on patrol. Then, without warning, you're caught in a deadly ambush. The air explodes with gunfire, plunging you into utter chaos. You witness friends and comrades falling around you as Mexican soldiers swarm from all directions. Now you're a prisoner of war, facing an uncertain future. You survived the brutal encounter, but many of your friends weren't so fortunate. In the depths of your despair and confusion, all you can think is, they started it. This wouldn't have happened if they hadn't attacked us. They shed American blood on what we believe to be American soil, an act of unforgivable aggression. That unwavering belief, that sense of righteous indignation, is precisely the justification that President Polk needed to rally the nation to war. Two sides, fiercely contesting one patch of dirt, clinging to their own versions of the truth, each convinced of their own righteousness. And that's how it all begins, with a spark of conflict igniting a blaze that would engulf two nations. Why were those soldiers even there, patrolling that desolate border? What were they guarding, and from whom? The answer lies in understanding the ambitions and beliefs that fueled a nation's relentless expansion. To understand the presence of those soldiers, you need to know about manifest destiny, a powerful and pervasive idea that gripped the United States in the 19th century. It was the widely held belief that the U.S. was not only entitled, but divinely destined to expand its dominion and spread its influence. This meant expanding from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific Ocean, claiming all the land in between. It wasn't just about acquiring land and resources, it was also about spreading democracy, American values, and the perceived benefits of the American way of life to the uncivilized territories. At least, that's the narrative that many Americans told themselves, a justification for their relentless westward push. But from Mexico's perspective, a nation with its own rich history and culture, manifest destiny looked less like a noble cause and more like blatant greed, arrogance, and a thinly veiled excuse for territorial expansion. Mexico was a young nation, having recently won its independence from Spain, and was fiercely proud of its unique culture, traditions, and long history. Their northern territories weren't just empty, unclaimed space on a map waiting to be filled, but were home to established communities and settlements. They saw the U.S. not as a benevolent neighbor, but as a powerful and increasingly aggressive one, constantly trying to encroach upon their territory and steal their land. In the US, newspapers, politicians, and influential figures actively pushed for expansion, fueling the flames of manifest destiny with nationalistic fervor. They were painting a picture of conquest not as an act of aggression, but as a necessary and inevitable step towards progress and civilization. For many Americans caught up in the spirit of the age, manifest destiny provided a convenient moral justification, allowing them to see taking land from Mexico as a heroic and righteous act. But in Mexico, this expansionist fervor felt like a profound betrayal, a violation of trust and sovereignty. They'd already witnessed the US take Florida, and watched as American settlers poured into Texas, gradually overwhelming the local population. They saw these settlers break promises made to the Mexican government, and ultimately declare independence, carving out a new republic. So, when the US formally annexed Texas in 1845 and then claimed all the land south to the Rio Grande River, Mexico saw a clear and unmistakable pattern of aggression, a direct and imminent threat to their very existence as an independent nation. The stage was set for conflict, born from competing visions and irreconcilable ambitions. Enter President James K. Polk, a man on a mission to expand the US. He promised Texas, Oregon, and California. Polk tried to buy California from Mexico for $30 million. Mexico refused. For them, selling land was unthinkable, a betrayal. Polk expected rejection. It gave him an excuse to get aggressive. He ordered General Zachary Taylor to move US troops to the Rio Grande, Mexican territory in their eyes. It was a provocation, daring Mexico to respond. Polk was baiting Mexico, hoping for an attack to justify war. When the skirmish happened, Polk told Congress, "Mexico has invaded our territory and shed American blood on American soil." It was political spin, simple, emotional, effective. Congress declared war. Polk got what he wanted. But was it a just war, or one he manufactured? Mexico was in no shape for war. The country was politically unstable. Presidents and dictators came and went. The government was weak and broke. The military was poorly equipped, trained, and paid. Many soldiers were conscripts with little loyalty to the government. Leadership was plagued by political appointees more interested in power than strategy. Then came Santa Anna hero, villain, master manipulator. Polk helped him return from exile, hoping for a peace deal. Instead, Santa Anna took command and led the fight. Mexico was fractured, its army unprepared, its general unreliable. Yet, ordinary Mexicans rallied to defend their homeland. Despite chaos and poor leadership, they fought with courage, but courage alone can't always win a war. Let's talk about the people fighting and dying. For American soldiers, the war was brutal. Long marches, disease, hunger. Ulysses S. Grant, then a young lieutenant, called it one of the most unjust wars ever waged. Culture clash was everywhere. Protestant Americans in Catholic Mexico often reacting with suspicion and contempt. This sense of superiority led to looting, violence, and cruelty. For Mexican soldiers, things were even worse. Poorly supplied, sometimes barefoot, fighting with old muskets. They defended their homes with incredible bravery, especially at Monterrey. Then there were the San Patricios, Irish and European immigrants who deserted the US Army to fight for Mexico, feeling more kinship with the enemy. To Americans they were traitors, to Mexicans, heroes. What does it say about a war when soldiers switch sides because they believe they're on the wrong one? The war had two fronts. In the north, General Zachary Taylor won battles and became a hero. Polk, worried about Taylor's popularity, opened a second front. General Winfield Scott landed at Veracruz and marched to Mexico City. The route echoed Cortez's conquest centuries earlier. Scott's army fought through tough resistance: Cerro Gordo, Contreras, Churubusco. The closer to Mexico City, the bloodier the fighting. The final stand was at Chapultepec Castle, defended by soldiers and teenage cadets, the Niños heroes. Legend says one cadet, Juan Escutia, wrapped himself in the Mexican flag and leaped to his death. On September 14, 1847, the American flag flew over Mexico City. For Americans, it was victory. For Mexicans, humiliation and trauma. The occupation was brutal, resistance was crushed, and the wound ran deep. The fighting stopped. Now came the lawyers and politicians. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, signed in February 1848, ended the war. The U.S. paid Mexico $15 million and forgave $3 million in debt. But this wasn't a negotiation between equals. Mexico had no choice. They lost over half their territory: California, Nevada, Utah, most of Arizona and New Mexico, parts of Colorado, Wyoming, Kansas, and Oklahoma. For Mexico, it was like losing a limb. A blow to their economy, pride, and future. The trauma never fully healed. The treaty promised rights to the 100,000 Mexicans now living in the U.S., property, language, culture. But most promises weren't kept. Settlers, lawyers, and speculators used the legal system and fraud to dispossess Mexican landowners. Over time, most lost their ancestral lands, becoming laborers on what was once their own property. The treaty was just paper. Reality was much harsher. The war changed both countries forever. For the U.S., it was manifest destiny fulfilled. New land, new wealth, but also new conflict over slavery, leading to the Civil War. For Mexico, it was a national disaster. Territory lost, a deep sense of injustice, and a long period of soul-searching. The trauma spurred nationalism and reform, but the scars ran deep. For Mexican Americans, it was a story of resilience. They fought to keep their culture and communities alive, facing discrimination and erasure. Their struggle for rights and respect is a direct legacy of this war. The psychological impact was profound. Caught between two worlds, their history often ignored or rewritten. Yet, out of loss came strength, a new vibrant Chicano culture blending Mexican and American influences. Why talk about a war from 175 years ago? Why delve into the archives and dust off these old stories? Because it's not just history, it's alive today. It pulses beneath the surface of our current events, shaping the landscape of our present. Every border debate echoes this war. The rhetoric, the anxieties, the very lines drawn on the map, they all reverberate with the decisions made so long ago. The border was drawn by a treaty at gunpoint, a negotiation shadowed by military might and unequal power dynamics, cutting through families and communities. It severed ties, disrupted lives, and created a legacy of displacement that continues to this day. In the U.S., the war is often forgotten, a footnote in the grand narrative of American expansion. In Mexico, it's remembered and shapes the national psyche. It's a wound that hasn't fully healed, a constant reminder of loss and injustice. It creates mistrust and resentment that still affects relations. The ghosts of the past continue to haunt the present, hindering true partnership and understanding. To move forward, both countries must acknowledge this painful history. Only through honest dialogue and a willingness to confront the past can we build a more equitable future. For Mexican Americans, the war explains their presence in the Southwest. It defines their heritage and their connection to this land. They didn't cross the border crossed them. Their homes, their communities, their very identities were redefined by the stroke of a pen. Recognizing this history is justice. It's about acknowledging the wrongs of the past and working towards a more just and equitable future for all. History isn't just dates, it's a story, a complex tapestry woven from individual experiences and collective memories. And who tells it matters. Whose voices are amplified and whose are silenced shapes our understanding of the past and influences our present. For too long, only the victor's perspective was told. The narrative of manifest destiny overshadowed the human cost of expansion. To understand the truth, we must listen to all voices, to the stories that have been marginalized and ignored. American and Mexican, soldier and civilian. Was it destiny or theft, liberty or land? Looking at this war from both sides teaches us about power, justice, and the kind of country we want to be. A country that acknowledges its past, learns from its mistakes, and strives for a more just and equitable future for all its citizens.